Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
So good to have you back live in studio, Morgan Streetman. Great to see Pat George. And off we go with all kinds of local stories we have to hit on. But first...
Well, it's great to be back on Columbus Day, which is now Indigenous Peoples Day.
Does it officially have a new name?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
There goes all those mattress sales.
They're going to have to rework their marketing. Well, a lot of interesting things going on. I tell you what, I take a week off, and what happens? So many things happen. The president gets COVID. Oh, my gosh. Missed that one. Now he's well already.
Fly attacks a vice president.
Oh, that's all the Democrats can talk about. I mean, I got more texts about that with the picture of an enlarged fly on his...
You didn't see Saturday Night Live, did you?
No, of course not. How'd it go?
Well, there
all
was
about the fly?
Oh, it was all about the fly.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said about President Trump we're going to talk about that, I know, about his COVID bout, but it is kind of crazy. In the amount of time since I saw you last, he got it, and he's better from it.
He got it. Everybody was saying he's going to die. He's old, he's fat, he's going to die. And now he's fine. And now he's just fine, which is what I thought.
We're great. We're in good shape.
Yeah. We're back at it now. Well, let's take a quick look back this week because, out came some news, and this kind of stuff just smacks you in the face, particularly if you'd been following this and if you cared about this, which I guess apparently now people are tired of it. They've moved on. But you remember the Hillary Clinton email scandal? Remember the 33,000 or so emails, or maybe it was 38. It was 30-something thousand emails that she deleted off of her server, claiming that they were all her personal and private emails. They just had to do with yoga and planning Chelsea's wedding and probably...
just girl stuff.
Stuff like that. Just it was all personal, private stuff, nothing important in there. And, of course, we've been looking for these for years because there's some suspicion, I don't know why, but there's some suspicion that maybe those emails weren't all personal. Maybe in and among those emails were like a pay-for-play scandal where people were donating money to the Clinton Foundation to try and get some kind of benefit for themselves. I mean, I don't know why we would think that, except for that's the way the Clinton Foundation was operated for decades. And in any event, apparently the State Department has all these emails because Mike Pompeo has now come out and said, oh, yeah, I've got all these emails. I've got them, and I'm going to start releasing them. These are the emails that, if you remember, Hillary Clinton used BleachBit on her server to make sure that nobody could ever see these emails. Remember, she said, what do you mean wiped? Do you mean like with a cloth? Did I wipe them with a cloth? No, lady, did you wipe them with BleachBit? Did you wipe the server, which she did? Now, I don't know why it's taken 4 years. I mean, where were these hiding? Is Pompeo just now going through his desk or something? He's like, oh, you know what? Here they are. I mean, that to me is a complete mystery. If he's had them this whole time, I mean, why weren't they released earlier? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm still interested to see what's in them. I think, unfortunately, with most people, the way the speed of the news cycle moves, they're probably moved on from that. I mean, people have largely, people might be saying, who is Hillary Clinton again? I mean, who's that again? Because we haven't seen her in a while. She's not in the news anymore. I mean, occasionally she is, but not like she used to be when she thought she was going to be the first woman president, breaking the glass ceiling, et cetera, et cetera.
She's in the news to criticize Trump.
That's it.
That's when I see her.
That's it. And to show off, how good you can look with plenty of Botox, I guess, or whatever it is they're shooting up her face with. Well, she's very cheeky nowadays. Okay. Well, anyway, those may, and I love how Pompeo says, well, he may be able to get those out before the election. May. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, it really probably doesn't affect the election one way or the other. But a lot of us have been waiting to see what's in those for many years. I don't know why they've been hidden for so long, but hopefully sometime soon we'll get at least a sense for what was in those emails, what was so important that she needed to use a program specifically designed to keep you from ever seeing what she was deleting. BleachBit. Why would you go to that length? If it was all just personal and yoga stuff, I mean, wouldn't you just delete it regular style, right? Would you go and would you wipe the server? Would you do that? Would you do like what Andrew Weissman and the entire Mueller team did with all their iPhones where they wiped, was it almost 30 iPhones? Oh, it's all by accident. They all just spontaneously in about a 2-week period all forgot their passwords and just kept re-entering the wrong password, until the phone reset. Have you ever even heard of that? How many times do you have to re-enter the wrong password where your iPhone just automatically assumes it's been stolen and being attacked by hackers and it wipes itself? I don't know. But there were like 27 iPhones that belonged to the special counsel investigatory team that were wiped in that fashion. So, here again, why are you wiping things? Why are you trying to get rid of the data? If you don't have anything to hide, this is government property. This is not these people's personal property. These emails on Hillary Clinton's server where she was conducting State Department business, that's federal property. That belongs to us, we the people. That's our property, not hers. She wasn't her own private Secretary of State. She was the Secretary of State for the United States. These people in the Mueller investigation were not their own private investigators. They're working for us, ultimately. They don't have a right to just destroy this evidence. But that's exactly what they've done. And, largely it looks like they've gotten away with it. But we'll see what's in those emails. Should be some interesting stuff. I'm betting only because she went to the trouble to wipe everything. Well, we got some great local interest. You might have heard on the lead-in, President Trump, you remember he was supposed to come to Sanford Friday a week ago, but then he came down with coronavirus and had to cancel that, and it's been rescheduled. So he's actually going to be in Sanford, Florida, over by Orlando tonight to have another rally, and doctors say that he's not capable of spreading coronavirus anymore, that he is completely well and he's not able to give it to other people.
That's what they say. And it was just a short time ago that he was diagnosed. So you just run right through that. Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Is Sanford near the Villages?
It's getting up that way. Yeah,
okay.
It is. It is.
Did you see on Drudge that they had the Joe Biden golf cart parade?
I did.
And it was 300 people, right? So that was the big headline on Drudge.
Yeah.
300 people supporting Joe Biden from the Villages. Well, then I just looked at the population of the Villages.
Yeah.
Somewhere between 60 and 100,000 people there.
Wow.
So I just thought that was a little bit of a spin, don't you think? Because when you read the
Sure.
article, it's like, whoa, big supporters of Joe Biden in the Villages.
And is this like 4 people per golf cart? Is that what we're counting?
I looked at the parade. It looked like 1 to 2 people max.
Yeah. Okay. So there were a few golf carts. There's no doubt there are people in this state, in this country that support Joe Biden. You don't see a lot of enthusiasm for him. He has this car rally where 15 cars show up. Meanwhile, they say down in Miami there were something like, they said something like 30,000 people show. That sounds too big, too many cars. 30,000. That sounds like, how do they fit all those cars on the road? But anyway, that's what they're saying. And of course, we've seen the Trump boat parades where, literally thousands of people show up on boats all across the country and lakes. Here in Clearwater, they set a world record. Up in the Northeast, they've had several of these things. And then you look at the Joe Biden rally in Arizona over the weekend, and even the news reporter there said, it's pretty boring. There's nobody here. It's just Joe Biden and his staff and the Secret Service, and that's it. So obviously people are going to vote Democrat. I guess there are some people that are going to do that. I think the election's going to be pretty close, it seems like, but it's hard to tell because the media seems to be so slanted. Now, are they completely off the reservation and they're just making things up and they're oversampling the Democrats and they're making sure to only sample Republicans in areas where they know the Republicans are not going to vote for President Trump? I don't know. They may be doing some of that. They may be doing that, may be everything that they're doing. It's kind of hard to tell. But one thing you can tell is you can tell that nobody's very excited about Joe Biden. They're not showing up for him at these events. There may be at most a couple of dozen people that show up, and that's including staff and reporters. So that's really nobody. And you see at these President Trump events, thousands of people show up.
There were 8 people at Fletcher and Dale Mabry Friday afternoon holding Biden signs.
Well, there you go. If you didn't know, Don Jr. was in Tampa yesterday along with Jorge Masvidal, the UFC fighter. And they were there along with some other speakers, some speakers from Cuba, some speakers from Venezuela, who were talking about it was the Fighters Against Socialism bus tour that Don Jr. is doing around the state. And they were talking about, how important this election is, how Joe Biden is like a Trojan horse for communism. And they call it socialism, but it's really communism. There's really no difference. And this was coming from people who know. This was coming from the people from Cuba who said, one lady from Cuba had come over literally on a boat. And she said, this was my experience. And what I saw happening in my country is the same thing that I see happening here. Changing all the holidays, changing the history, taking down the statues, all of these takeovers of our culture and our history and changing everything is setting the stage for the Marxist revolution. And these people said it to a one. This is a Marxist revolution. Don't fool yourselves. We recognize it. We've already lived it once.
Quick break, and now we're back.
Well, that was fast.
Yes. So we are getting into something that's happening here, another local interest story. Karen Pence is going to be in the Tampa Bay area.
Karen Pence is in Tampa today. So, boy, you can tell the Trump campaign's putting a lot of emphasis on the Tampa Bay area and the state of Florida. And we'll see if that winds up paying off for them in the election. I know some of the stuff that I have seen, and, of course, again, it's hard to tell because you've got the national polls, you've got the state polls, all of which seem to be run by people who have an interest in the outcome of the election, kind of like the Presidential Debate Commission, but we'll try to get to that a little bit later. In other words, everything seems to be rigged in favor of the Democrats. And why is that? Why is the media so one-sided about everything? I mean, I'm sure if you're listening to this show, this is a question that you probably are asking yourself regularly.
The media is its own party with its own interests, which, of course, align with the Liberal Party for the most part.
Yeah, they don't seem to be aligned with the interest of the American people. The media seems to want to usher in. It's a corporate media, right? They're owned by a few very large corporations, by and large, with some exceptions like Beasley Media and other independent-type media groups that are out there that still let you have a voice, still put out original, interesting content that's not all coming from the same perspective. So we're really glad to be a part of the Beasley Media Group family here on the Morgan Streetman Show. But more and more, the national news is all controlled by a couple of very large, very powerful corporations, and they send out editorial direction. And you're not allowed to speak against the editorial direction. We see that with CNN's Jeff Zucker. He tells them, this is what I want you to focus on. I want you to talk about impeachment. I don't want to hear about anything else but impeachment. Back when the impeachment was going on. We see that all across the board with the national media. Even Fox News now, with the Murdoch boys, Lachlan and his brother, James, they have taken Fox News on a much more liberal track than it used to be when good old Rupert was in charge.
3 words. While all this is happening, they hate Trump.
Boy, did they hate Trump. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. These people. Now, look, I know Trump can be abrasive. I mean, I think anybody that's watched him knows he can be abrasive. Okay, but look at his policies. Forget his personality. Forget the tweets. Look at the policies. The policies were effective. The policies have been effective. He's been right on the stuff that he's done and the stuff that he's said. History has proved in the last 4 years that he was right. He was right about Russia. There was no collusion. He wasn't involved with Russia. That's been proved. He's right about his tax returns. There's no hidden, involvement with the Russian mafia, all this nonsense that I've heard. And they say, he only paid $750. Well, if you dig into that a little bit, their own analysis is that actually he paid $7.5 million. He just paid it using some tax credits that he had, largely. Now, people say, well, that's not paying taxes. Well, that's the federal government considers it paying if you use your tax credits towards your tax bill. So, I mean, if you don't want these rules to be in place, then change the tax code. And that's something I've advocated for a long time. I'd like to go to a simplified tax code with a flat tax across the board. It's the same kind of thing that Herman Cain was advocating, and many people before him have advocated when they have run for office. Let's go to something simple. Let's go to a flat tax, 10% across the board or something like that, and no loopholes. No carrying over this loss, no nothing, just flat across the board, 10%, period, the end. Let's make it simple, and let's make it fair. Now, don't ask the accountants because they might not find that to be so fair. If we were to change all that, we're going to be moving their cheese. And as a lawyer, I kind of understand that sentiment. But in any event, I'm in favor of going with the flat tax. But let's get back on track here because we wanted to talk about the amendments, the constitutional amendments that are on the ballot right now. Now, many of you may be voting even right now here in the state of Florida. And, Pat, you've got the Amy Coney Barrett hearing on, which is ongoing at this time. But let's talk about these constitutional amendments real quickly, because there are 6 of them, and you might be wondering, what do they mean and what should you do? Now, of course, we can't really tell you what to do. That's your business, how you want to vote on these various things. And if you listen to the Morgan Streetman Show over the last 5 years, you'll remember that we generally have a bent against amending the Florida Constitution. We don't think this is the proper way to deal with issues. Issues like this should be dealt with through legislation or through another process. They shouldn't be put on the ballot every few years for the voters to come in once again and kind of piecemeal rework the Florida Constitution, because that's what keeps happening. Year after year, that's what keeps happening. But let's run through what's on there this year. The First Amendment, Amendment 1, is a citizenship requirement to vote in the state of Florida, and it says that only U.S. citizens 18 years of age or older may vote. Now, the Florida Constitution currently says that every citizen may vote, so you could argue that this is not really even a change because it already specifies that you have to be a citizen. But, as you've seen through the past several years, people want to redefine words all the time. They want to redefine what does packing the court mean. Now we're hearing the media and the Democrats saying it means something else. They've wanted to redefine what is a citizen. Remember, Barack Obama, before the last election, said you're never more of a citizen. Even if you're not a citizen, you're never more of a citizen when you vote. He was talking to people who are not legal citizens of this country and saying to them, go out and vote, and we're not going to prosecute you if you get caught. That's what he was saying. What was he trying to do? He was trying to encourage non-citizens to consider themselves citizens and to go vote anyway because they might be registered with a driver license or something else. So this particular amendment, Amendment 1, I think adds a little more clarity to exactly what it means. You have to be a U.S. citizen only and 18 years of age or older. And so on this particular amendment, to me, it sounds good. It sounds like a good change. It's more clear. It's more certain. Do you want non-citizens voting in your election? If so, why don't we just send mail-in ballots out to the entire world for our state of Florida elections? I mean, why not, right? Why shouldn't people in Kazakhstan have a say about what happens in Florida?
North Korea.
Let's send them to North Korea. Maybe it'll keep them from sending over that ICBM we saw over the weekend, right? So Amendment 1 might be something you want to consider voting for. That's up to you as a voter. How about Amendment 2? Amendment 2 is a very interesting one. This was pushed by John Morgan, the famous plaintiff's personal injury lawyer based in Orlando, Florida. And this is the amendment to raise the minimum wage in the state of Florida Constitution. It's currently at $8.56 per hour. That totals up to about $17,120 a year if you work 2,000 hours a year. And they want to raise it. This amendment would raise it to $15 an hour or an annual salary of $31,200. Now, a lot of people might say, well, why not? I mean, gosh darn it, why not? Why wouldn't you want to raise that? Why wouldn't you want to help out people at the lower end, help out the poor people? But what you're not realizing is there's not any compulsion that makes employers actually employ people. Employers only employ people when it is profitable for them to do so. That's how business works. I don't know if you probably weren't taught that in school because our schools have really failed us on basic economics and basic market forces and incentives. But if you raise the minimum wage, if you raise the cost of employing people, the only result is going to be that fewer people are employed. It's simple. It's very simple. So if you want fewer people to have jobs, then you should vote yes on Amendment 2. If you want the free market to be allowed to work and people to be allowed to have jobs, including young people, do you think these supermarkets are going to be able to employ all these young workers who are half the time not even paying attention maybe? They're young kids, basically, 15 years old. I remember when I was working 15 years old for minimum wage at McDonald's. I remember how it was. And I wasn't worth $15 an hour or whatever the equivalent number would have been back then. I just wasn't worth it. So I was lucky to have a job. It taught me some things about life. It allowed me to earn a little bit of money, spending money for myself. I didn't really need it to survive. I mean, it was a good thing. It was positive for my employer, and it was positive for me. But if we go mucking around and thinking we can just set the minimum wage by central planning committee, all we're going to do is we're going to destroy jobs.
And also, when you think about restaurants, they already operate on thin margins. They're trying to make their COVID comeback. So this would put more strain on them.
How can restaurants even make it right now? You know, I mean, and a lot of them haven't. I mean,
And the price has gone up so much at a restaurant now.
yeah,
Because of the food, the meat. It's horrible.
You don't think, you think the employers are going to absorb the increased minimum wage if you increase? I mean, don't you understand what's going to happen? Prices are going to go up. I mean, don't you get that? Now you say, well, now I can't make it on $31,200 because all the prices have gone up. I mean, you have to really not be thinking this through to think that we can just raise the minimum wage and that's it. There's no after effects. And now the people are going to live almost twice as well as they otherwise would have. You have to not be thinking it through, and you have to not understand incentives and basic economics. And that's a shame. It's a shame we're not teaching basic economics. And truth, it's a shame that we're now saying that the concept that 2 + 2 = 4 is a white supremacist concept. It's a colonialist concept. That's what they're teaching in schools. They want to teach that maybe 2 + 2 = 5. Maybe math isn't true. Maybe it's just something in white people's heads, right? I mean, that's silliness. That's absolute silliness. These laws, incentives, mathematics, these things are universal. They apply all places in the same way, and you can count on them. And so it pays to learn them and know how they work so that you can apply them correctly in your own life. We'll be back with more on the amendments.
We're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Morgan, so good to have you in here. As I let you know off air, 0 sleep last night, maybe 20 minutes.
Hey,
and
you look great.
Thank you, and you perk me up, you know? So good stuff as always, especially with Pat George, too.
We love our Pat.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, we've had this team together for over 5 years, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It really does.
Seems like it's been a year and a half.
We've had a great time.
These last 6 months, a little different story, but
yeah,
a little slower.
Yeah.
Not this team, but
Not
life
this
in general.
Team, but life in general. It's been a weird year, hadn't it? I mean, I'm about ready for this year to be over with myself, and I know a lot of people are feeling that way. But we got to get through this election first, and then Lord knows what happens after that, right? Depending on who wins, or maybe not even depending on who wins. I mean, it could be some interesting things going on after the election. But one thing that you as a Florida voter have got to do, or you don't have to, but you may choose to do, is vote on these amendments up or down. So, we've only gotten through the first two. Those may be the most important, but let's see if we can run through the remaining 4 fairly quickly for folks just to get them up to speed on what these amendments mean. The third amendment, Amendment 3 that's on the ballot, has to do with whether the primaries are going to be open. And so just so you understand, currently, if you are registered as a Democrat, then you can vote in the Democrat primary and nobody else can vote in that primary for who's going to be the Democrat candidate. And that makes some sense, I would think. And then if you're registered a Republican, then you can vote in the Republican primary, but nobody else can vote in that primary. And we've got millions of people in the state of Florida who are registered as NPA, no party affiliation, so they're not allowed to vote in the primaries because they're not registered as Republican or Democrat.
They're waiting for that third party to come.
They're hoping. I mean, the Libertarians are finally going to get it together one of these days. But what this amendment does, Amendment 3, it allows anybody to vote in any primary or all primaries. So that would let you, if you're a Republican, vote in the Democrat primary and vice versa. Or if you're an independent, you could vote in any primary. So to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because then the parties and the people that are members of the parties themselves are not picking their own candidate necessarily. So you could have, let's say, all the Republicans flood over to a Democrat that they think is not going to be electable, or vice versa. All the Democrats get into the primary and vote for a Republican that think that person could never be elected. And you start to play these political games where you're setting up the other party for failure by voting in their worst nominee or their worst potential nominee. I think it's a bad idea. Some states do it that way. Unless you really feel super strongly about this, our basic MO is that when in doubt, vote no on these constitutional amendments. So when in doubt, vote no. The open primaries one for me is an easy one because I can see all the political shenanigans and machinations that can occur from that type of thing. I think that's an easy one to decide to vote no on, but of course you, the voter, are free to vote how you see fit. Amendment 4. Now, this is a very interesting one. This was actually put forward by a group supported by Florida Power and Light, and this requires a double approval of a constitutional amendment. So I think this is interesting because if you remember, like when we did high-speed rail, one election it was voted in favor, the next election it was voted back out. One constitutional amendment in, one constitutional amendment out. It doesn't make any sense. It's a little bit schizophrenic, and that's because that's how voting can sometimes be. The voters aren't, necessarily plugged in. Maybe they don't even understand what these amendments do. When they go to vote them, they just see them, they read them, they think, well, that sounds nice. It'd be great to have high-speed rail. Let's vote yes.
What a great suggestion. I think they lead you to the yes answer.
They always do, don't they? They always lead you to the yes answer. So this particular amendment, Amendment 4, requires, so currently you got to hit 60% in one election to get a constitutional amendment passed. This one requires you to hit 60% in 2 consecutive elections. So you'd have to vote for it now in favor 60%. And then the next election in favor 60%. So what would that do? Well, you can imagine it would make it harder for people to amend the Constitution. You'd have to win 2 elections, and it would also take longer to amend the Constitution. So, I kind of like it just because, again, we're not in favor of going in and amending our Constitution every time we want to make a legislative policy change. That should be done through the legislature, not necessarily by constitutional amendment. But, obviously you feel free to vote how you want. But if you wanted to vote in favor of that, you're going to make it harder in the future to amend the Constitution. Amendment 5, now we're getting into the 2 amendments relating to homestead and property taxes, which are a little bit, not that interesting to some people. But this one basically enlarges the amount of time that you can use to transfer your Save Our Home benefits. So if you sell your constitutional homestead right now, currently you have 2 years to buy another one, and you can transfer those tax benefits to your new homestead. Amendment 5 gives you 3 years now instead of 2 years. I think we've got a very, complicated system in the state of Florida with all this, homestead and then taxes and moving it here and there, and I'm sort of not in favor of all these different categories of people and different tax rates and stuff. So, vote how you feel on that one, but it enlarges the time from 2 to 3 years. Amendment 6, similar to this. Now, this involves the property tax discount that we gave to combat veterans and wounded veterans in the state of Florida. Now this allows the property tax benefit to be transferred to the spouse on the death of the veteran, and to stay with the spouse as long as he or she keeps the property that had that tax benefit, and until such time as he or she remarries. So again, we're just creating more different categories. Now, this is obviously something a lot of people feel strongly about, trying to do whatever we can to support the veterans. So my gut is that probably winds up passing. But, we've got this very complicated tax system with our property taxes and all the different – it's almost, it's not as complicated as the federal income tax system with all the loopholes and different things there. But you need to think about that. We're creating these systems, and these are the systems we've got to live under. So you shouldn't then complain about the systems if this is the kind of thing that you're voting for.
Looking at the newspapers, well, not newspapers, online publications across the state of Florida, a lot of them were in line with kind of what you explained.
Oh.
The only one that you largely differed on is most of those, Tampa Bay Times, Orlando Sentinel, they all said yes for Amendment 5. And I think you were leaning a little more towards no. You said vote how you want.
Well, Amendment 5, right, just to enlarge from 2 to 3 years. Okay, like I said, you can do what you want to do. To me, we're just further complicating our system, creating more loopholes. Hey, it would benefit me, because I'm a guy who owned a home in the state of Florida, and I haven't bought another one yet, so I would still have a Save Our Homes tax credit if I hurry up and buy another one. But, I would prefer just a fair, simplified tax system where everybody gets treated the same. That would be my preference. So, all right. Well, we had another local interest story, but we're going to have to move on. That was on the Columbus statue in Columbus Park down at the end of Bayshore being vandalized yesterday evening. And the saving grace there, they say, is, but it's washable paint. Oh, well, okay. I guess that makes everything okay. Just use washable paint, so everything's okay. Now, let's talk about President Trump having coronavirus. What a story that was. We've kind of missed that story. It's basically over now. He's no longer symptomatic. He can no longer transmit it. So, the story's kind of over. When he went in the hospital, when he went into Walter Reed Hospital, I was a little bit nervous because it sure did happen pretty fast. I figured a guy like Trump would be against the concept of going into the hospital because of the signal that it might send that he was really sick. I thought, boy, if he winds up going on a ventilator, we're in deep trouble, you know. And, of course, I was hoping the whole time, I hope our president gets better. And I would have felt the same way if that was Barack Obama. Even though I didn't really like Barack Obama, didn't agree with his policies, I would have thought, you know, I hope our United States president, all of our president, gets better. I mean, this is our country we're talking about, right? It's our team. But I'll tell you what, a lot of people, in fact, I had one of my colleagues, a person that I know, is kind of a friend of mine. I do like him, but boy, I mean, talk about negative about the president. I mean, like you said earlier, Pat George, these people hate the president so much it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe how much they hate the president. He wanted to have a bet that he'd be dead by the following weekend. And I had to write him. I said, look, I don't make bets like that. I'm not interested in making bets on people's misery or death. And that's not the type of person that I want to be. I don't hope anybody dies, you know, et cetera. But boy, did we see the Democrats on Twitter, on social media, other places coming out and saying, finally, you know, we even saw the Washington Post, I think, posted an article very quickly thereafter, imagining a world without Trump, you know, something like that. It may not be the exact title, but something like that. And, you know, you're just thinking, since when did it become normalized in our society? And there is a large segment of our society that's become normalized to want to kill your political opponent. Or
2016.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This has now become normalized. And we saw it just over the weekend in Denver. You know, we saw a guy get shot in the face by another guy. The guy who shot him was named Matthew Doloff. He shot and killed veteran Lee Keltner, who was a guy who made cowboy hats. He's had his own company since 1994 making cowboy hats. And basically, you know, if you look at the still shots and the people have put them together in a sequence, you can see what happened. There's some altercation where the shooter is reaching into the vest of the guy who got shot. The guy who got shot is backing away and smacks the shooter in the face. Now, granted, he probably shouldn't smack somebody in the face, but I don't know what he was reaching for inside that guy's vest. You know, maybe that guy was armed. Maybe he had a knife. Who knows? But the point is you can't be reaching into somebody else's vest, and you do have the right to defend yourself. So he's backing away, and he smacks him, and he has his mace out, and the guy who got smacked, who wound up being the shooter, pulls out his gun, points it at the guy's face, shoots him in the face. And in fact, in one of the still photos, you can see the reflection of the laser sight from the gun in the guy's sunglasses. So that would have been a second or two before he got shot. Now, it was quickly reported that the shooter was an Antifa sympathizer. And, of course, Antifa was there having a counter-protest to a pro-Trump rally, so trying to get into conflict, trying to mix it up. And if you watch some of the videos, you'll see people running down the street away from the shooting, screaming, celebrating. They were happy, said, and we couldn't even use the words for you, but said a lot of cuss words. They were, yeah, one less white supremacist. I'm glad he got killed, got shot in the dome. You know, it's great. One less white supremacist to deal with. And there's no evidence this guy who was shot was a white supremacist that I'm aware of. I've seen nothing. Nothing's been reported in the media. In fact, this whole story hasn't really been reported in the media. You know, the shooter was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He's being held without bond, as he should be. Obviously a dangerous guy. And like I said, a lot of people initially said he was Antifa, and there was a lot of pushback from the Denver-based media saying, no, he wasn't Antifa. He was there as a security guard for Channel 9 News. Well, some people have then dug into his social media posts, and he's got a very strong anti-Trump bent where he's apparently confronting people in public who have on Trump buttons and screaming in their face that they're racist and how does it feel to be a racist, etc. Well, the city of Denver's now come out and said that he was actually not licensed in the city to be a security guard. Now, you want to hear what I think is probably the saddest fact of the whole thing, and this you don't see reported hardly anywhere. The guy's son, Lee Keltner's son, the guy who was shot, his son was there with him. He saw the whole thing. He saw his dad get shot in the face, murdered at point-blank range in public. Think about how that would feel.
We're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. We are going to go out there But we're going to go out there to a caller in a moment, and you wanted to bring a couple things up too, Morgan.
Yeah, we have a caller, so we want to get to our caller, but I just wanted to say, referencing the shooting in Denver, think about what happened in Charlottesville in 2017 where a guy ran his car into a crowd, killed one person, injured 19, and how much news that made. It's even still making news today. It's even still being used in debate, even though false talking points. Now, just recently in Portland, we had a guy, Michael Reinhold, who stalked and shot a Trump supporter, a Patriot Prayer person in the streets of Portland. 39-year-old Aaron Danielson was the guy who was shot. Stalked him, though. You could see it in the videos. And by the way, because the media doesn't tell you this, but you didn't see the videos, he actually comes out he's hiding behind something and follows the guy, and then you hear him say, "We got one here," and they shoot him, and he shoots him, and then, of course, he died in a hail of gunfire when he was shooting at federal agents. So now we've had two politically based murders in recent weeks. Those are just two that we know about. I'm sure there's been more people that have been killed. I mean, we saw that guy, I forget exactly where he was, but he was a big Trump supporter. The African-American guy got shot on the street corner. We don't know if that was political, but it's 2 or 3 murders recently, and they haven't even made the news. You don't even hear about them in the national news. Well, let's hear from Byron. I know he's got something interesting to tell us. He always does. Hey, Byron, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you.
So tell us.
What you got for us,
Yeah,
Byron?
I think is he on, Pat George?
Yeah, he just got to turn his radio down.
Okay, turn your radio down, Byron.
You know what it is? I'm on Bluetooth.
Ah, the
There we
old
go.
Bluetooth.
George? Yeah, he just got to turn his radio down.
Okay, sir. I'm there we go. I turned my Bluetooth off. I had to turn my Bluetooth off. This technology's gone wicked. All right. So the Chinese yuan just got a 13-year high. Go back 13 years, where was America? Well, we were on the precipice of handing everything over. Okay? We were right about the point where we were breaking, and it was all going to be Chinese everything.
Mm-hmm.
So my guess is now that we are going to see, if Biden wins, he'll slip them under our military radar. They'll infiltrate us technologically, and we will be subjects of the new hegemony with the Chinese. They're going to be the leaders of the new world. Their dollar's going up, or their yuan, their value of currency is going up. Ours, inevitably, is going to go down. We're going to see a change in the America experiment turned Asian experiment, and all the money and corpse hauling beans.
And what is that going to mean for us as Americans, do you think, Byron?
Post 1989 and Russia, we'll have the mob and the gangsters taking over and the gangs, and it'll be chaos. It'll be social unrest. It'll be like it was right after the fall of Russia. It will divide up. It won't be the United States. It'll be the divided states of America.
Well, we're already seeing the evidence of that coming. Now, let me just ask you this. Do you think we're going to wind up in some kind of open conflict, open warfare with planes and bombs and missiles being fired at each other with China over the South China Sea or over Taiwan? Do you think that's in the future, or is it going to be a different kind of a war?
Yeah, I think it'll still be that cyber terror that's been going on since '99. If you look it up with the Department of Defense, in Latin, they write that we are at a state of war with the Russians and the Chinese. It's written. I mean, we definitively are in a cyber terror war. So you'll see an escalation of these diverging technologies shutting down entire power grids. We'll be subject to their technological boom of stealing our technologies, and that's it.
And that's
And
so
Biden-
terrifying to Americans. We get twitchy if our cell phone service isn't coming in well.
Yeah.
Well, remember, T-Mobile and the others went under for that 2 weeks. They did say that was from an outside cyber attack.
Well, and we've even heard people who have said that this coronavirus itself was a form of warfare, it being released or allowed to get out into the population and spread to the United States and other places, that in and of itself was a form of warfare by the Chinese, who are willing to sacrifice a large number of their own people to accomplish their goals in warfare.
We're definitively in a state of war and have been for some time, it is written under the Department of Defense minutes. They put out the information out there. It's out there for everybody in plain sight that we have been in a state of war with these cyber terrorists throughout the world, mainly China, some of which are India, but they do it with simple phone calls, calling us saying they're Microsoft. And, good old Bill Gates said not too long ago, he goes, well, we wouldn't do anything that would harm or make the Chinese feel uncomfortable, right out there on MSNBC. So he's ready for the Chinese takeover in America as a second-grade, third-grade world nation. So I'm done. You've heard my piece.
Well, that's a very interesting piece, Byron. We always love hearing from you. Thanks for being a regular caller. And I tell you what, I know from talking to you offline, you've got a lot of knowledge, and you really study this stuff. So it's always interesting to hear your perspective. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Well, I tell you, we were going to go out there, and I would have to say, Pat George, the out there segment we had planned was not as interesting as what Byron just did.
I was just going to say it pales in comparison. It pales in comparison to Byron's comments there. I'm a little.
We can't even call it out there.
No, I love Byron, but a little Debbie Downer.
Well, Byron's just a realist. He's just trying to look at all the data, and you have to say that stuff has been going on with China and America for a lot longer than many of us realize. This has all been written about, the year of the rat back during the Clinton administration, where Clinton turned over all of our satellite and missile technology to the Chinese, and then shortly thereafter they were brought into the World Trade Organization as a full member, and they've been conducting economic warfare against our country for more than 20 years, which we have totally enabled. We've given them all of our technology, all the blood and treasure that we've spent to develop the technology. It's not easy to develop this kind of technology and make these kind of innovations. In fact, here in America, we're one of the most innovative and technologically advanced nations possibly in the history of the whole world. I mean, there's just some question, if you go back far enough, were there ever more technologies way, way back in time versus more recently? Certainly more recently, after the Germans, in World War II, where they became very advanced with their rocket technology, and we imported a lot of their scientists into our country, and that's how we created NASA and our rocket technology. The Apollo moon missions, Saturn V rocket. If you look into this, they say that we don't even still have that technology as we sit here today. We cannot recreate those rockets. We've literally lost that technology. So we've had very advanced technology in our history. And back in the 1990s, Bill Clinton led the effort to just turn all that over to the Chinese. So, we've given them every opportunity to get an advantage on us in warfare. And what did we think was going to happen at the end of the day? What were we expecting? Folks, thanks for being with us. It's been a great week. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard. And if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.